So thank you, Leslie. Thank you, everyone. Some of you know Sean, but I know there's a lot of KMAC people here, so maybe not all of you know him or his work. So we have known each other a long time. And I think it's probably important, um, since this isn't just, and it's difficult because I don't think I've really ever interviewed somebody that I've probably known quite like I know Sean. As
That's
in
why I did
terms
this
of, that's
too.
why you're right. So it's hard to know where to start for me personally, and then to try to share that with people who may be unfamiliar. But in a similar, we've been talking about sort of growing up in sort of the south end of Louisville and discovering, completely aside from any kind of formal education, discovering, let's say, punk rock or music as a kind of outlet, a sort of way out in terms of self-realization and expression. And I don't know, and I'll ask a few questions of Sean in a minute about what was the sort of spark for him. But in terms of my work at KMAC, and while we have had this evolution that Leslie talked about, going from a museum that looked at folk art, let's say outsider artists, into now what I just call international contemporary art, which absorbs all of that. We try not to give labels or make too much distinction, although labels are important in some degree in terms of talking about frame of reference, like where do we come from, what is something trying to do. And so for Sean, since he's been making visual art for a long time, I think when I first saw the work, I would put it in this category of like folk art, right? Because it had this, again, these words start to get a little blended, but it had this kind of outsider quality to it that you recognize in a lot of artists who were, say, self-taught. But I think self-taught is a much better term, simply because while Sean is sort of self-taught, he also is self-taught in that he's explored and dug through art history on his own. He's a reader, he's into literature, he's into music, he's into film, he's into philosophy, and all of that is like embedded in all of this work deeply. And I don't know, I guess, and I know that you have also kind of eschewed any kind of formal training or wanting any kind of formal training.
Right.
I guess I'll just start off by saying, what do you think of that label distinction? How has it informed the way you approach music? Because also, that I think is very interesting about you is that even in your music, while you were this like self-taught sort of like singer, you played with a lot of accomplished musicians who were like trained formally. So
Right.
you've always blended a lot of that, or like collaborated with people like that. And even all this is informed by modernism and modern.
I've never really, I've never really worked with amateurs. Like I just haven't, and I got lucky in that way. I mean, I didn't avoid an academic art training out of some sense of contempt. That was definitely not the reason. I wasn't really equipped to navigate it, and also, it was something that, at least as far as visual art goes, it was something that I put on the back burner. Very like, I was just like, I'll do that later. And
When did that start?
you mean, when did I start making pictures? I mean, I probably started making pictures. Karen and I went to the state fair in about 1999, and I was really blown away by some of those pictures.
So it did come after the music.
Well, when I came back, I was talking to Kathy, and I was just like, I think I'm going to make some pictures, just for fun. And she was just like, oh, it's pretty simple. I said, well, okay, how do you do it? She was like, oh, just paint over the parts you don't like, and then keep the parts you do. And I was like, oh, So, I mean, I was really like, I was pretty blown away by how much I dug that state fair. That's the stuff I saw at that fair. And then I asked myself, because I'm a jackass, I was raised by a TV, like most guys from my generation. I really wasn't. Humans tried to raise me, but it just didn't work. So I sort of thought to myself, like, okay, if I had never started hanging around with like really talented, trained musicians, and if I'd never hung out with like, trained people, like what would if I had never left Pleasure Ridge Park, what would my art look like? And so that's exactly what I started to do. My early pictures are basically like, if I was still in PRP and I was like, I'm going to win that damn blue ribbon, like, what would those pictures look like? So those are the pictures I made. But like, if I thought, man, I'm going to win that blue ribbon.
Well, that was so
I just thought, okay, well, that sounds like a TV show. So I just went with that.
So I remember that work, and while a lot of this is sort of evolved from that work, this is all fairly new, right?
Yeah, most of it is.
And so that work also, what maybe not everybody knows about Sean, is that also when I first met him, it was one of my first jobs ever at the University of Louisville. I was working with somebody who knew I knew you, and they're like, "How do you know Sean?" He's like, "Well, it's from music, from Louisville." He's like, "Oh, well, I know him from battles, from like
medieval stuff.
Medieval stuff." And I thought, that's weird. I never met anybody from that completely different world.
Yeah, that's the only other interest I've ever really had, right. Which is history.
So that earlier work. So Sean would. You make your own armor. You make.
Well, yeah, I was in the Society for Creative Anachronism for like 30 years, right. Because it was like the most. It was just like the most whacked out subculture I'd ever seen. I was just like, the idea that a bunch of hippies in 1966 decided, well, the only way you can really find out what this was like is to put a bucket on your head and beat the living shit out of each other. And I thought, that's for me. That like it was the only other real interest that I've ever had was history. Like every time that I would like quit playing in bands, I said, I got to get away from my idiotic bohemian friends. I would always restart my history degree. And then of course, like after about, I don't know, 6 months of that, I'd just be like, oh, and I'd end up hanging around with you guys like you. Like, which I really can't blame you because I kind of got there first. So you should really just blame me.
But right. but the music, if you didn't know Sean's music, I mean, it was, for lack of a better term, like, aggressive and very raw and unfiltered.
Yeah, it wasn't aggressive enough for me.
Which, right, but I mean,
right. But I mean, those guys went. Some of those. I mean, I went to Berkeley.
But being like,
they could really play. My guys could play.
Right, but I think you instilled, in a lot of that, and I'm getting to a lot of these pictures of what I think those early pictures were that maybe aren't quite as represented, but a little bit here, that it was like pulling in a lot of that, your interest in religion and war. And,
yep.
And we were talking earlier about just this humanity and all the things about humanity that sort of frustrates you and you find absurd, and all that went into some of those.
You should be scared. You should be scared.
Yeah.
I mean, people who aren't like worried about their fellow human beings, you really should be worried,
So do you think?
I mean, when you're historically informed, like, I mean, I'm the kind of guy that, like, when I was 20 years old or 21, we'd be on the road and people would try to talk to me about, about contemporary rock or something. I'd be like, man, I'm just really into researching chariot wheels right now, like, or something like that. I'm really into the Assyrian Empire.
Right.
And I would be like, that's all I would think about. So people would like try to talk to you about just like, man, what do you think of this record? I don't have any idea what you're talking about. Like, I completely stopped buying rock records when I was like in like 84. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, I've been really torn between this bohemian world that took me in and my obsession with history. And those are the two prongs of that thing. I've never really been able to make up my mind as to where I want to be. So I just I've always been interested in both. And for most people, you can't really actively mix that stuff. It just, it causes erudite, educated people to become, it's too much cognitive dissonance for them.
Like the id.
Well, when you're making references to, how gnarly most of human history has been, that's just not what they're after. I don't know what they're after, but they certainly don't want to think about being run over by a Mongol, on some tiny pony. And it's like the kind of thing that I thought about every day.
This is where I was trying. This is where I was trying to get. We're trying to get into Sean's psyche here, which maybe not. I'm going to try to steer you away from that. But
yeah, Pleasure Ridge in the 70s was like being in like living among the Mongols.
But this is what's always fascinated me. You are really your reference point for most of humanity and history are these sort of gnarly the wars, the gnarliest parts of the human condition.
And you just said,
the battles, the battle culture, the medieval. I mean, that's something that it's a big reference point for you quite a bit. Not now.
No, not now.
I'm trying to get.
Oh no, but it was definitely always there because I didn't think about anything else. I'd be I'd be just among a bunch of other like angular sort of people who
seem to be
who wanted to be at Warhol's factory, and I'm thinking about helmets or something. Like,
yeah, right.
you know, when I'm working the door, I'm like actually thinking about 14th century sword hilts or something.
Yeah.
And that would really be what I was what I was actually thinking about when people would be like trying to be, you know, angular and like they were in a Sprockets, like they were in that SNL skit Sprockets. They'd be trying to be in that thing, and I didn't want to bum them out, but it's definitely not where my head was at.
Yeah.
And plus, like, things were pretty gnarly when I like the independent music and art scene was, there were a whole lot of scary people involved when I first got involved. So I kind of liked that because there were like an incredible amount of unpredictable criminals around. So it was just like home, you know, like I felt right at home immediately because there were people around you all the time that you just didn't know what they were going to do. I mean, it was fun.
Yeah, it's a subversive.
But it was never a completely civilized environment, and that's what I kind of was trying to make everybody understand. You think you're in a civilized environment, you're not.
No, it's a true anarchy in that you got all these different people, like you said, a bohemian set of people, and then some people from, you know, your neck of the woods who are coming in, and you're trying to.
Well, the thing was, is we were just as, you know, informed as they were. I mean, we knew about all the same crap that they did. And then when you know, that's really the Louisville curse, is that when you get around someone from a larger town, you immediately start playing the small town card on them. You know, you start pretending like you know, and then when you get around people from smaller towns, you can't relate to them either.
Right.
So we took that on the road everywhere we went. That just like, you live in a continual state of dissonance where, like, you know, I really, really like, you know, I mean, I love abstract expressionism. I love, you know, like every type of visual art you can think of. Like, I don't really dislike any of it. Well, but at the same time, you'd be like, there'd be skinheads in the room with you, you know, and people would try to pretend like that wasn't happening. And you're like, no, it's happening. Like, the cops are watching us. There's, you know, Louisville was just this island, like a castle, and it's completely surrounded by foes on, like, in 200 mile circle around us. Like, they're completely antagonistic to us. So I just thought that my interests, I tried to make it make sense. Most people didn't get it. They just wanted you to just like choose one team. I just couldn't do that.
And you're doing that now because, I mean, this is a new show and new work, and it's sort of, you've got a lot of painterly references here, your daily drawing exercise, which is
right.
Sort of interesting work, and then all of this almost pure abstract work.
Yeah.
And you brought up abstract expressionism. One of the things I wanted to ask you later, but I'll ask it now, because this is the newest work, correct?
Well, I do these things in huge batches, but the newest stuff are the oil paintings behind us.
But in terms of like when did sort of, for lack of a better term, like pure kind of abstract work come into?
Well, I think most people who make a lot of pictures are going to accidentally figure out how abstraction works and how to make a good abstract picture. If you just mess with it enough, if you just mess with art supplies all the time, I mean, I'm not going to say some people are incapable of getting it, but most people are eventually going to kind of understand why an abstract picture will work. You know, for example, like Twombly, like you have to make a lot of pictures to understand why those things are good. You know what I mean? You have to understand that if you make this squiggly mark over there, you could ruin the whole thing.
Right.
You really can.
Do you believe in sort of, I mean,
you're walking the knife edge all the time.
Do you believe in kind of a pure abstraction, or do you think abstraction is always abstracted from like nature, life, surroundings, or do you believe in the Pollock, you know, version of it's just completely
there's only
spirit moving around?
Man, that's a lot to unpack. There's only one really, I think there's only one concept that runs through the whole thing, is that if you thought that I was the kind of guy that was capable of sitting in a room and drawing some naked hippie from the ceramics department and drawing, you know, like being in a life drawing, like that's insane. Like
right.
I have absolutely no interest in glorifying the human form whatsoever. I'm not interested in it's reality has been done to death. You know, like Lucian Freud ended that. That was the end of it. You know.
So as someone so steeped in history, I mean, what do you think the motivation for that is and was and still is?
For me,
or trying to perfect the human form, and why you
well, that's what people really care about. I mean, the human animal just, well,
the mirror. You want to
well, I mean, you know, I'm somewhat reticent to say what I really want to say. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to fall for it. I know what you're trying to get me to do. I know exactly what you're trying to get me to do, Joey, and I'm not falling.
Okay.
Now I appreciate the fact that you're leading me toward the pit. I like that, but I'm not going to jump. Human beings are interested in other humans. That's what they're really interested in. They're always searching for, like, you know, those beautiful lines, you know? Mm-hmm. And man, I just don't, human beings aren't beautiful to me. They're just not, you know? I mean, I think my wife's beautiful, but that's kind of the extent. I'm like incredibly myopic in that way.
One time.
Just like, well, hold on. Most beautiful people, they're dangerous. They're very dangerous. Like, and the more beautiful they are, the more dangerous they are. I mean, they basically, like, I mean, there are beautiful people who are they're absolute morons, and we make them incredibly filthy rich. We're still doing that for no reason at all.
One time you told me, and this is when you were in your, you know.
You better not let me get anywhere near them.
Your hardcore phase of really analyzing the human condition in terms of being.
I was forced to. I had to. My parents were incredibly terrifying. Well,
no, but you said to me once that a good metaphor for human interaction is the fruit stand, because everybody there trying to find the best piece of fruit so somebody else doesn't get it.
Unfortunately, that might be where what you're really, that might be the reality you really is.
Do you still feel that way?
Well, the evidence for it is all around you.
We're fighting for the best.
Resources seem to be the thing that everybody is. How do you break out of that? Can you imagine like any type of like human expression that isn't tied to resources? Mm-hmm. I'll give you a second. Like the only thing that you've ever eaten in your life that wasn't alive at one time is salt. Everything else was alive at some point. I mean, people.
Well, and human civilization was actually in some ways started, at least agrarian, because of salt, right? Because of.
Well, that's one of the it's one of the reasons. But yeah, it's like I can't help but feel that humans have been glorified enough. I'm the loyal opposition. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, Caravaggio did a pretty good job at trying to make you understand, like,
the dark.
Yeah, what it is and why you should be worried about it, because it's the masses. What they value, it should frighten you.
Well, this is so I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that you also talk a lot about is trying to blend this kind of high-low thing. Oh yeah. But the middle brow is also the thing you detest the most, right?
Well, you know, Crumb did a job on my brain. I mean, I saw Crumb. I mean, before I saw Crumb, the people that probably had the biggest impact on my psyche were like these figures that you would see on TV in the 70s that were like almost shamanistic figures, like Phyllis Diller, or Paul Lynde, or Charles Nelson Riley, or Tiny Tim. You would see these people and you'd be like, man, these people are a whole other species. Like they seem to be like these untouchable others. Like they seem to be, they weren't part of this weird game that the rest of America seemed to be playing. And in the place where I grew up, the slavish sort of worship of, I mean, there were two things that they valued. They valued physical force and they valued beauty, because those were the resources at hand. You know, I mean, once the working class started to crash in Pleasure Ridge, they're going to play whatever cards they have. But I just grew up around a bunch of people like that's the only thing that they respected. And I found that really hilarious, and it was also terrifying. And so that's how come the middle sort of got erased out of my story, because like I just felt like, well, these can't be the only savages in the world, just the ones around on my street. No, like, no.
I also noticed, I was thinking about earlier some of the 70s work you just mentioned, and I was thinking about the Chicago Imagists and
Oh yeah. Oh man.
there's some,
Oh, the Harry Who.
especially
Oh my gosh, those guys.
early work in this work.
Oh yeah. Well, the Harry Who was, but Crumb was, getting back to Crumb. The Crumb happened. I probably saw Crumb for the first time around the time that Andy Kaufman shows up, and so that really did a number on me. And I was really heavily into Velázquez, and I was really heavily into Goya and El Greco at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So like my brain just got like soaked in with all these disparate sort of chunks. And
you move through that quickly. I think your pictures, you move through some of that influence pretty quickly, don't you?
well, Crumb is really, he's not stoked on the human race, or not stoked.
No, he's not.
He's not. No, he's not.
Yeah.
I'm way more stoked on my fellow man than Crumb is.
Mhm.
But that stuff, that just all came together in this weird, like, what makes an outsider? To me, an outsider is Tiny Tim or Charles Nelson Riley.
It's funny you brought up Tiny Tim, because I was thinking
Man, that guy's so heavy,
the
dude.
difference between you and him is like he's so freakishly out there for most people, for most culture at the
Right.
time, and you have these reference points. Like there's no reference with.
Well, Tiny Tim, like, I mean, when I went places with my mother, like, say we're shopping at J.C. Penney, it's 1970. People would come up to us regularly and be like, "Is y'all midgets?" Because like my mother was like 5'1" and me and my brother were tiny. People would like, it was really amazing, like how anybody who, I mean, the beautiful made war on the ugly, and the strong made war on the weak. I mean, it was a Darwinian like jungle of chimps, and it's sort of that's how I started to so in my head, what an outsider really is, I mean, the art world wants to define it as somebody who's like either so disabled that they might not realize how outside social norms they are, or somebody who's just self-taught and is just working with what they have. That's, to me, that's not what it is. It's like the best of American outsiderism is somebody who just like won't go away. You know what I mean? Like Phyllis Diller just was like, man, deal with it. Like, I mean, just the sheer, I mean, when you would see Paul Williams singing on like the Sonny and Cher show, to me, that just seemed unspeakably awesome. Like this tiny little weirdo dude, and he's just like, "I am the greatest songwriter in the world, and you will kiss my tiny feet." I just love the audacity of that.
So, and you brought up clown shoes earlier. So it's like the role of the clown then is like, and I think of Phyllis Diller. I think of these role like the role of the clown in society.
Well, they're definitely American personifications or some sort of like mirrors of the trickster god. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. And in America, it's like, if you're clever enough or if you're talented enough, like, you can wear clown shoes, just like, like, please ask me about my clown shoes, because I'm going to kick you. I'll kick you in the balls with these big clown shoes, just like so trolling is an American tradition. Mm-hmm. And I'm bringing it back, baby.
Right.
I'm not going to abandon the ship. I'm just not going to do it. It's my ship now.
With so much, you go back and forth with so much humor in some of your work, but then some of this, I would say that, are there certain...
That's me just flexing.
I was going to say.
I'm just showing you, like,
okay.
I know how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I understand how how abstract art works, and that's what that is.
It's a breakthrough.
I'm just,
you found.
well, no, I'm just showing you, like, I can do this if I want to do it. I just don't always want to do that. Like the chicken picture. I mean, the chicken picture, someone was just like giving me a hard time, just like, you never make anything look realistic. So I was like, I'll make something look just kind of realistic, you know? And sure enough, they were just like, oh man, I really like your chicken picture. Of course you do.
I'm not gonna
Because God knows that a chicken needs to be as realistic as possible.
I'm not gonna paint the perfect human, but I'll paint the perfect chicken.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's just like, why are you hung up on realism, dude? Like, just, I don't know. Just, you don't, I mean, I don't know. I don't know why some people are just, they want everything to reflect, you know, that this fantasy about the world back to them, I guess.
Are really good at that you appreciate? Well, you
That are
like,
really good at-
Well, you like Caravaggio and Velasquez.
Well, you realize that Caravaggio, like, he didn't have to draw on that canvas. He just started slapping paint on there. I mean, that guy is like, and he was a belligerent guy. I mean, he's not a friendly dude, you know, but, you know, he knew what he was. And, but what I'm saying is, like, when you see those highly skilled people, and I mean, I'm sorry, but I think I think Rembrandt is trolling us. You know? I mean, Rembrandt and John Singer Sargent, that stuff is better than real. That's not realism. I mean, do you think Madame X is realistic? No. That picture is not realistic. It's better than real.
And
Yeah.
you think,
and Rembrandt's rubbing your nose in it too.
and right, because you think they were working at a time when achieving that was just all that mattered. It really wasn't about pushing anything forward.
Well, I think some of those guys are trolling. I think they are point blank showing you that realism isn't what you're interested in, or you wouldn't be into this, you know? Yeah, I mean, Rembrandt, and to a certain degree, I mean, there are other painters that are sort of like that. I mean,
but contemporary painters, I mean, you seem to be either interested in sort of the culture, the pop culture, and the artistic culture of the 20th century, and you mine that territory quite a bit. It sounds like.
well, yeah, and that's probably just because of TV. You know, TV keeps you grounded in the way it keeps you grounded in the mid 20th century. You know, like if you were raised, you know, watching TV. I mean, the way that the average person, I mean, I don't really know what the average person in 1955 really thought about, you know, Pollock, for example. I just know that how his school of art was portrayed in a sitcom. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like they would just, you know, they'd show some bohemian, you know, like.
Well, yeah, like America, I think, needed to turn him into that way for him to be widely appreciated and widely accepted.
Well, I mean, Life magazine did it, right?
Right.
You need to get out of the sun a little.
Maybe.
Yeah. You should move. Is that better?
I think I have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
The Quonset hut is blocking
Yeah.
it for me.
So I mean, yeah, I'm constantly wrestling with all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, like
Empathizing it.
I can't make heads or tails of it, and I'm not afraid to show you that I can't make heads or tails of it.
And your process is, and I use the terms raw and unfiltered quite a bit, but like even the process is quick. And I mean, do you labor over things for quite a while, or do you make studies?
Well, some stuff comes from sketchbooks, and I don't want to know what's going to happen.
And do you have a hierarchy in terms of like you know, oil paintings, the drawings, the sort
Well, I mean, if I had my way, I would only work in oils on very large panel, 4x8
so you
feet.
Okay.
I mean, that's what I would really do, but I can't move pictures like that. I just can't move them. I mean, how many people have room for a 4x8 picture of some shamanistic attack on everything you hold dear? Most people don't want to get up in the morning and look at that.
Right.
I mean, but they should. They should be forced to get up and look at it, but they don't want to do that. No.
I mean, it's in the real world still.
Well, once again, like, I mean, there's still people who who are operating on very demented and elaborate magical systems. And that's still all around you. Yeah. And so I'm constantly wrestling with that myself. I'm predisposed to metaphysical type thinking. You know, because I mean, I stopped doing work I never did a lick of work in high school. I went every day and never did a single thing. I just read whatever I wanted to, and I had nowhere else to go. But you know, I'm basically a self-educated person.
Yeah, what did you mean by that exactly? That you're
Well, I'm always
steeped in
well, I'm predisposed to metaphysical thinking because uneducated people who are highly intelligent, and I was surrounded by them all the time, they just have a tendency to engage in. They want to understand what the mechanisms of history are, and they want, and like for example, like I didn't really understand what the mechanism of evolution even was. I didn't understand where mutations came from. You know, I mean, I was well into my 40s before somebody made me understand. It's like, it's solar radiation, you moron. You know, like I didn't know that. I was just like, oh man, you know, how did the fish get feet? You know, like surrounded by like really, really highly intelligent people all the time who didn't know anything. I mean, my stepfather, I mean, his IQ was massive. He would never read a book in his life, never read a work of fiction in his life, and proud about it. Total stone cold, scary redneck dude. High IQ. I mean, like he could have went to MIT. He could have easily went to MIT or the Center for Advanced Study. Easy. I mean, a brilliant person. Stone cold, scary, beer drinking, iron worker redneck guy. Yeah.
So what do you think standardization and formal training, do you think that's kind of a bane of
I don't think it would have helped me.
But what do you think about it in general? I mean, in terms of where
I think if you've got, like, if you can really draw, you should go to art school. And there's a lot of people out there who, for whatever reason, I mean, if wanting to draw well was the only thing I wanted, I probably could have got sort of good at it. But once again, like if you think I'm going to sit in a room for hours and hours and draw somebody's feet, I mean, you're out of your mind. I don't even like looking at my feet. You know what I mean? Like what I would do is I would just draw like big cartoon feet, like second grade feet. I wouldn't be able to resist. I mean, I think some people who are truly talented and aren't like aren't stuck in this weird never land spot that I am, you know, like, I mean, some people can really cross over, you know, they can cross all the way over into the academic world, or they can cross all the way over into thinking, I mean, as far as art goes. And they could, but the whole time if I was in a place like that the entire time, I would be like constantly reminded, I would keep trying to make it be like TV. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean? I would just be like, all right, like, what should happen now? What messed up? I just can't stop. At least when I was young, I could not stop doing this weird performance art kind of thing that I was just, I was totally addicted to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you had to endure more than one incident where I was just like, this is too boring. Like,
yeah. Do you feel like the reticence to ever want to take those steps, and even with music, into some sort of like uber professional? I mean, you're constantly going to sabotage that. That's something we used to talk a lot about.
I did when I was young. It was simply like, well, no, it's not self-sabotage. It's very gratifying to me. Right. It was very gratifying to orchestrate things like this, because really you're trying to, you know, I was continually trying to remind people that just outside of your bubble, you know, there are people who, you know, would burn you at the stake, and I just can't forget those. They're always there. I you know, yeah. So it was always very hard for, I mean, like studying history, I was kind of able to control it, but just the temptation of hanging around with bohemian jackasses was just, I couldn't, you know, what could I do? you're just like, you just miss it. So I would just go back every time. I think if somebody can work up the bravery and the fortitude to study the right way, by all means they should do it.
Yeah, their aptitude is for that.
Well, I mean, if you've got the ability to navigate it, I'm impressed. But I didn't have that ability. I just didn't. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that'd be great. Oh, okay, sure.
Sweet.
Does anybody have any questions for Sean? About yeah.
Well, it comes in batches because I make handbags all the time. I'm totally addicted to making
Leather.
Yeah, leather work. So if I'm in a leather work cycle, I won't even look at the paints. I have to set them aside. I mean, I have to. It's such a different form that.
Do you still do metal work?
Well, I don't do as much tin work as I did. I mean, some of those Milagros were getting pretty good. I was getting pretty good at that. The problem with those things is, man, you wouldn't believe they're just physically incredibly difficult. So no, I don't. I mean, I do them in batches. I'll just be like, okay, I have to stop making purses now, and then I'll just get all the paints out, and then for about a day, I'll try to get my head in that spot, and then I'll just start attacking the panel. I mean, once the panel's gessoed and it's white, if you just make some marks on it, now you've got a problem you have to solve. So that's how you start it. At least for me, that's how I would start it.
How many of these can you do in a day, or do you do those?
Oh, when those black and white things, when I'm doing those, I produce between 5 and 10 a day, and I can do that for as long as I want. Like, there's really no end to those things, because that's really where a lot of my kind of nastiness and that whole devotion to the pirate, the pirate way, is really comes out in that, because I was really influenced by underground comics. Yeah.
Right.
I was just obsessed with those things.
Yeah.
Because it was hippies making fun of hippies. And, oh, that was for me. Yeah. Because it's just like, yeah. I mean, they just sold themselves out. When you read those underground comics guys, they're just completely selling out their own thing. They're just like, man, I just don't want to have to get a real job. I mean, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You're good at making fun of yourself too.
Oh yeah.
Right.
And then when punk rock cartoonists came, like Doug Allen and Gary Panter, that stuff just did a job on me. Yeah, I can do that stuff all day, every day. Yeah, because I've just looked at so many comics and things. Yeah. Anything else? Should we have some snacks now?
Any other questions?
I'm not going to admit to any crimes that I might have committed in the past. Thanks.
Thank you.
I categorically deny all of my previous anything. I categorically deny.